Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our minutes of April 4th.
Moved as written.
Second. Okay, any corrections, changes, edits? Hearing none, all in favor of the minutes as written?
Aye.
Minutes of April 11th.
Moved as written. Second.
Any edits, changes?
They look good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Media business, public comments.
Who wants to go first? You want me to go first? I'll go first, because God, I have to have my comments, but they're not gonna be recorded. That's a shame, because I was gonna talk to the
They are
guest.
being recorded.
That's a bummer. All right, well, anyway, so my comment, because I missed a couple of school board meetings and, oh, they were so fun to watch on TV. But we had a guest speaker who was a topic that's near and dear to me, as we all know. So that's really what I want to make a public comment about, but I'd be remiss not to state a few things that lead into really my feelings on that guest speaker. And as I can go really fast, she will have a hard time, but I'm gonna do it anyway. So I missed the last meeting, but it was only 23 minutes, so it's not like parents could have really seen anything, but boy, it seems like an awful lot transpired in those minutes that we don't see. Which is really a great lead into other things that I want to say. I did notice that we had, in spite that the agenda said one appointment resignation, that there were 2 appointments and 1 resignation that we later found about. But the appointment was, well, 2. We have a science teacher coming on. We have a new special ed coordinator who I don't know. However, as a parent who has had more than my share of dealings with the special ed department, I happen to think that Trotter walks on water. So it's not a personal comment, and I don't know who this person is coming in, but as a parent, I will openly state I have real concern that once again, we hired an internal person. Given that, if you actually Google laws in the state and how things should be, you can come across great things like this 15-page document which talks about paraeducators and how it's the most restrictive support there is, and we have more than any school in the entire state. I happen to know as a parent who has had a child involved who does not need this. I've seen these documents online. You can get blank ones. It's public. This is public information that every parent in the world can find. Any person who wants to read it, every single person at that table can read it. You can inform yourself about how it really should be. And instead, I had hoped we might find somebody who was outside who had a little different perspective, because you know what? That's the next lead in. Having a different perspective come into this building is a really great thing, and that's not an insult to any of the people who work in here. We have amazing teachers, we have amazing staff, but every once in a while when we finally get a fresh new voice, it's actually kind of nice. So that touches upon the speaker who came in. Bullying. I'm very open about the fact that that's something that I think this school does not do a fabulous job. There's no insult to either one of these 2 amazing people that are sitting next to me. Didn't even know you'd be here. But I will say that you do a fabulous job. We had a speaker come in, and I want to say something. Because when you put a puzzle together, if you have 6 or 7 pieces, you're never going to see the full picture. And just like they're one piece of the puzzle to deal with bullying, and Brian and Chris are one piece of the puzzle to deal with bullying, and at the start of the year when you say to kids, hey, don't bully or you're going to get in trouble. And we have all these little pieces. Having a speaker come in was one piece of the puzzle. We don't have all the pieces of the puzzle at this school. For the 8 years my child has been here, I've never once thought for a millisecond that there was all the pieces of the puzzle. And there was a few things that last summer when, I had a lovely meeting where I bawled my eyes out. I begged you guys to do certain things like, hey, a safety committee. I seem to recall saying that. Maybe looking at the policy. Maybe looking at the law, maybe educating yourself, maybe realizing that even today when I had a conversation with somebody who's worked here for 3 years and then left for a year, that there's a piece of the puzzle that I don't get as a parent every single time there's an issue with my child being bullied. So, the policy is only a piece, and if you're not following all of it, it's not a great piece. But the speaker came in and 2 of the things that he talked about, which were really great, are things that I had never thought of before. so I think it bears mentioning. One was, not everything is bullying. Some people say things you don't like. I probably said a lot of things that people don't like. That doesn't make it bullying. There are gonna be times that people say things you just don't like, but that's not bullying. There's a key component to being bullying. The second thing is, and this is where the school I think really falls down, and not forever not trying, is bystander. Okay, the one thing that that person said that he really feels could have made a difference for his child, who is no longer here because of what happened to him, because of being bullied, because of his reaction to being bullied, because of how he took it in, that there were 2 times the things that he thinks could have made the biggest difference were bystanders. Okay? There were 2 sets of bystanders that he thinks could have made a huge difference in his child's life. Okay? Some were girls, some were boys. But we don't do anything with that, and I think people forget that just because we become adults, bullying doesn't stop. Right? Saying something people don't like isn't bullying. Bullying involves a power imbalance. When you have power over someone else, and you use that power in a way that's maybe not always really acceptable and it's not benefiting everybody and you're doing it for reasons that are questionable, when you have a power imbalance, that's bullying. And as an adult, we still see that. And as an adult, being a bystander and saying something when you see something also still becomes very important. That's my spiel.
Anyone else?
You want to say something? Anyone say something?
Name's Mike Klein. Just wanted to start off, first off, just reading one thing. Going through some, actually SAU 53 minutes, which I think concern Deerfield that I hadn't seen discussed at the school board meetings. I wanted to see if we can get, if not some answers to this tonight on the agenda in the future. Let's start off with, I just want to read off one thing. RSA 91A:1, preamble. Openness in the conduct of public business is essential to a democratic society. The purpose of this chapter is to ensure both the greatest possible public access to the actions, discussions, and records of all public bodies and their accountability to the people. This was kind of a summary that supposedly RS 91A is to be used for. Going back in SAU 53, I believe it's the October meeting minutes, I see notice about an 80% tuition for PACE students. Can anyone elaborate on this? Are we fixing to get hit with a fund? I see we're not on the board now.
I'm happy to answer that.
Okay.
We traditionally have paid 80% as part of the PACE group.
80% of what?
Of the state of the standard.
The
Bump.
80% of the tuition, cost of tuition.
So that's nothing new, that's no change.
Okay, so it says Deerfield's not paying it?
Can you clarify what the PACE program we're referring to is, because we have PACE in a couple of different variations as well.
So that's actually referring to a charter school that was started in Pembroke. It's not in regards to PACE
the
as in
educational
the
program.
education.
Okay. So this is a different, this is a
This is-
overload.
That is dealing with tuition for students who go to an alternative high school.
Okay. Is that, I didn't recall having seen that mentioned in previous school board meetings, that this is an option, is this an option for Deerfield students?
It's a public charter school. It's open
Okay.
to any student.
Okay. The other thing dealt with, actually some comments from February, where there seems to be discussion about setting up a additional special education unit for, let's see, Massachusetts, looking for the phrasing of it. New England Center for Children here at Deerfield. Can we have a little discussion on this, or where is this stand? And where is the room in Deerfield in this?
Traditionally, the public comments are just comments. If you'd like to ask and petition the board, we as a board,
Put it on the
Yeah.
agenda, that's fine.
yeah, it's not happening,
Okay,
so
it's not happening?
this year it's not
No,
happening.
no.
This year it's not, so
If you'd like to ask to have that, I can elaborate on this. So it was a suggested opportunity. It does not fit in the space of this school, and it is not gonna happen this year.
I thought there were some comments that, from Karen, who said that Deerfield had space.
Karen doesn't make those decisions.
Okay, I didn't hear you, I didn't see any minutes that you objected to that.
It was discussed at the following board meeting here.
Okay, which one would that have been? Cause I
I
can go
don't-
through those minutes
I-
as well. Didn't see anything.
I don't remember.
It turns
would
into.
that have been a closed session?
Right, no, it was under executive board report. I got into it in regards to what was presented. It was presented as an option. The board was not interested in pursuing it. The space is not
I would
here.
be interested, I'll leave you my email address, because frankly, going to
That's
the
fine.
Deerfield Community School site and attempting to track down board meeting minutes, the links take me back to 2007, 2008, nothing newer.
Right.
So that would be nice if that would be beneficial to the community if the past history, I didn't recall seeing any minutes for an April 11th board meeting either.
Those were just approved. Yeah, we just approved
I-
those tonight.
It was my understanding, am I incorrect? I thought it was my understanding that anything other than sealed minutes are to be available within 72 hours?
If you request them, yes. We don't typically post them ahead of time when they're in draft form, but you can, if you want to see them, we have to provide them within 5 days.
Okay,
So you can make that request after a meeting if you'd like.
okay.
Any other public comments?
Just wanna make a quick comment. I attended last night's curriculum night. And I wanted to bring my son's work in. I've been actively working with the administration and his teachers, and we've talked throughout the year, and I'm told that he's a smart kid and, he can do this work. And when I looked at his presentation last night, I was outwardly disappointed. I let him know that I thought that it wasn't an acceptable level of work. He's in 7th grade. This thing was riddled with grammatical errors, no punctuation. I wanted to bring it in tonight, but I didn't. In order to do that, I should ask to be on the agenda and bring in a visual presentation. So I'm upset about that, and I'm stewing over this, and I'm looking at a lot of the other projects, and with the exception of what some of the students call the tryhards, I've never seen so many run-on sentences. Nobody used spell check for anything. I don't believe a teacher looked at, my son said not a single teacher looked at any of the work that he had put on this paper. He spent more time gluing colored paper to his trifold than he did working on the statements that he was putting on there. Now, this whole thing is curriculum night. My understanding is it's to connect the parents with what the kids are doing throughout the year. I found it ironic, the one subject that my son didn't write about was English and language arts. But I think that his presentation as a whole shows what he's learned this year in English and language arts and what he's learned throughout his years here at Deerfield Community School with respect to English and language arts. I don't know if it's a teaching problem. I don't know if it's a student's problem. I've asked the teachers on several occasions, what do I need to do to help them do their job better so that my student can write as well as he speaks. Part of my son's problem is he doesn't like working on a computer. He's hunting and pecking. You can't carry a thought when you do that. But a lot of the work is done that way. A lot of stuff is done on Google Classroom. Been very quiet about the amount of technology in the school, but there are certain things that are gonna suffer for it. If they're not physically writing down notes, then they're not learning how to write. I'm gonna keep it brief, but I'd just like to share with you guys, just a small excerpt, and I'll be done. In math class, we are doing this really cool and fun project where we were assigned a partner and a constellation, and we got the coordinates for each point of the constellation and graphed it in a document, made a slideshow with some fun facts, and we now take the coordinates, excuse me, that's not a comma, I have to breathe, and take a big thing or a graph paper and a really big black bag and pocket hole, and when you get under it, it looks like constellation. Anybody that's ever spoke to my son knows it's not the way he talks. Anybody that spoke to me knows that I wouldn't accept that out of my son. But somehow, the people that are in charge here, people that are supposedly teaching my kid, are allowing him to go in front of the entire community, represent himself, me, and the school in that way. It's disgusting, absolutely disgusting. I was actually furious last night. I thought the pottery was great. Kids did a great job with art, and I am a big fan of arts and crafts and trades. It's where I make my money. But if I can't speak or write, I can't run a business. My son's in 7th grade, is graduating next year. I don't know, aside from getting private tutoring, I don't see a change happening for him in this school. I have another son in 4th grade, and I get the same fears for him. So I'll just pose a question to you guys, the same question I posed to the teachers, is what should the parents be doing at home to help the teachers do their job? Because my kids aren't learning. They don't have to. And it wasn't just my son's project. The whole place was riddled with mistakes. I heard 2 different teachers say, well, maybe in the future we'll put more emphasis on spell check. It's just a button. Spell check's just a button. It's not an adult sitting down with a child and saying, this is why you write this way. This is why you don't use a comma and then and. This is the rules of sentence structure. So I just wanted to, I didn't want to actually, I really didn't want to say this tonight. I'm putting down my son's work. I warned him I was gonna do so, but it's painful. I was more embarrassed than he was. I think that's what frightens me the most. So he's in an environment now where he's not embarrassed. He's not afraid of retribution. He's not afraid of punitive measures. He just does what he wants to do. If he doesn't do it, he's gonna pass. We all know he's gonna pass. Nobody's gonna hold him back in 7th grade. I'm gonna be hard pressed to get my kid held back. So I just think, I'm glad that there's an English language arts curriculum presentation tonight. I wish I could stick around for it, but I do have another meeting that I have to go to, so. I hope that it's informative for everybody, and
Any other public comments?
Can I say something positive? Because boy, neither of us said anything positive. I want to say something positive. Because one, I always complain over and over, which, you know, I'm not gonna stop. I'll probably complain in 10 years that you don't fully follow the bullying policy. But I actually want to point something out. I want to thank Chris Smith because you're the only person, actually, that has ever followed up with parent communication in the proper way that your policy ever states. So to say one positive thing, so thank one person, and 2, I was reading that, I had no idea what you needed me to read other than that it was grammatically really incorrect, so I'm sorry to say that. But the fact of the matter is this year we have seen more emphasis on at least looking at curriculum, the math program, with a change to the math program, with the math night that I didn't attend because, again, my son's younger. It got rave reviews. I was a reader for it'd be interesting to see what they're gonna say about the curriculum for that. And then last week or the week before, there was another request for other parts of the curriculum. And that's something that never happened before in the last 8 years. So again, sometimes it's a positive thing when we actually get people from the outside who bring in new ideas. It's always a ball of wax. Sometimes they have really great ideas, sometimes they don't, but when you get a different idea, it's a really good thing. It's a positive thing.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
He's addressing something that the school lacks. It is visibility that you take the average student, not, with the special ones, it's the average student. And the average student can be categorized to advanced, mid-range, and needs help. That's not getting addressed equally and not getting an awful lot of looked at. It's kind of like you get the mid-range and then everybody, it just, a lot of things fall in the cracks unless you speak up. And I felt that Chris, at least when you could speak with him, was there, engaged, and wanted to work with you, where other people, it felt like you could speak with them, they look at you, they don't hear you, and you could waste your time. You know, he actually took the time to listen and do something about it. Whether right or wrong, he worked it through. And I feel like you've wrongly done something to him. I know whatever reason it was, you let him go, but it was like you had the public vote him in and you voted him out. And it just smells funny to me. And I don't know, you did what you did, you had to. So that's my 2 cents, but the mid-range student needs help too.
Could we have your name for the minutes?
Jeannie Klein.
Thanks. Any other public comments? All right, gonna move on, agenda review. Do we need to change anything?
We need to add a 1 to number 10 under appointments and resignations.
Okay, I was also wondering if we could have the guidance counselors speak before the curriculum presentation, as the curriculum presentation might take a fair bit of time. What does the board think of that?
I'm fine with that. And the safety committee report, we killed the safety committee at the last meeting.
Okay.
So there's, we can pull that off.
All right, if you guys are willing, we will move you ahead of the line, ELA, and Greg, Heather, welcome.
Thank you.
I think we had invited you here to talk a little bit about, obviously, student intervention and prevention services. We have had conversations over the last few meetings in regards to how the safety of the building is dealt with in event of catastrophic situations, and how we are set up for that. We wanted to kind of talk about how preemptively and we deal with situations before they get into bad places. So if you guys could talk a little bit about how you engage with the students and how you help foster through the community, that would be great.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that comes up with kids that use the terminology like at-risk students. And so sometimes that's coming from home environments where there's drug and alcohol abuse, or there's physical or sexual abuse. Kids who have different other needs, sometimes cognitive impairment. I was looking at the CDC report on school violence before I came to the meeting, and I have copies and I give it to you guys. But it really talked about some of the risk factors for students that you should be concerned about, but knowing that even if a student had all these, it doesn't mean they're going to be someone who's violent at school, but it's certainly a population that I think Heather and I serve here. I know we split our caseload in half of the school. I see about 250 kids. I'm responsible for them. And my current caseload is probably the highest it's ever been. I'm about 50 kids a week, 50 individual kids a week. And when I went through my numbers, really the biggest risk factor we have for some kids right now is the opioid crisis. Probably about a third of my kids come from homes that one or both parents are addicts. Almost a third of my kids live with grandparents or other family members. So really one of the shift I would say is away from the violent aspect, but really for in our community is the kids who struggle with family attachment or struggle with poverty or sometimes mental illness at home. But I think both Heather and I, our big thing has always been reaching those kids. And I think the nice thing about working in Deerfield is we've always been allowed to kind of counsel as many kids as we can see. And certainly, like the rest of the state, that population has increased. So I'm not sure if I'm exactly answering some of your questions, but I know when I look at risk behavior or kids that I'd be concerned about are some of these kids. It's really an increase in Deerfield. I know it's the same in other districts too.
And they'll say too that obviously I think we have to understand that the most important thing we can do in a school is have a relationship with our students. And I have to say, like, I love this school, and it's because of the small community. And, we'll immediately, if there's an issue, the teacher will be letting us know. Or oftentimes, and, even with the littlest thing, but if it's any type of safety issue, whether it's personal safety or other types, we're on the phone with parents immediately. And I think, we have good class sizes, we have advisory programs, we have the magnet program, we have our health curriculum, we have these, there's usually an adult for everybody. And I have to say, like, that's something that I think not all schools have. And if we were to ask our kids, I think they could say, yep, there's an adult I could go to. And we also, kids will get flagged. And, you know, we'll hear, hey, so-and-so's really struggling and having a tough day, there's something going on. And again, we jump on that and then address it and take care of it. So, I mean, I think we're lucky in that respect that we have, you know, we see a ton of kids between the two of us. And then we also do the daily, you know, first aiding with kids that happens on the daily. You don't know what's gonna happen when you walk in the door. But putting things back together, then, you know, having the kids get through their day.
Nate?
The timing of this is good. We were on the agenda is the bullying policy. Do you feel like what we have right now in place, I mean, in the timing, you know, we had the presenter last month and unfortunately I wasn't able to make it, but I'm gonna be there. I thought, sounds like it was very good. So do you feel like our bullying policy, are there changes we could make that would allow you to have more flexibility, more effectiveness, more better practices, anything that we can do to the policy that you think would help?
I can't, you know, honestly, I can't think of other changes to it. I mean, I think having the responsive classroom in younger grades really helps kids do the social learning, and it really helps address, I think, pre-K through 5, really some of those issues. And the teachers do a lot of that now, along with what we do in the school. And I think the middle school, the advisory program, along with some of the, being a smaller school, I think we do a lot of intervention. I'm sure there are people who disagree with some of that, but I feel like when we are told about a bullying incident, we address it with those students and we address it with the teacher and we contact parents. So I feel like it's addressed fairly well here, but I know it happens sometimes. And I don't know how many bullying reports were done formally this year, but I think it's a pretty small number. So, but certainly I'm open to feedback from people too, if there's other things we could be doing.
I think a lot of what the board is interested in doing is making sure that if we can help foster relationships between different groups in town, whether it's the you know, the welfare department or the, you know, whatever organizations, we want to make sure that we create as much of an interwoven net as possible. So you guys are the professionals, and we wanted to hear if you see there's a gap.
I don't think there's a gap in terms of the community. Like we're in touch with Denny quite often, and you know, like when it comes time for we'll be calling each other about kids in need and what they may need, or we're connected with our Seacoast Mental Health Center. We talk to counselors on a regular basis. We're connected to DCYF more than we'd like to be, the Division of Children, Youth and Family Services. I have never seen that as a issue for us.
No, I think just being in a small town, but Denny's always been great to work with. And I think we overlap a lot on stuff. She's really supportive of families, but if we know of a family who is in need, we'll talk to her, and she sometimes will call us. And I think more lately, last couple of years, Heather and I have been bringing more families in as far as the grandparents who are caretaking for their grandchildren. So sometimes we'll do like little parenting things, or we'll talk to the grandparents, because this is all new to them again. They have to be parents again. There's even some great grandparents who are taking care of children in town. So I think we're really trying it that way. We do a lot of referrals to Seacoast Mental Health if people are looking for family therapy. And then also we can find other resources sometimes. So I think we're okay for that. I really do. But again, if there's pieces we're missing, we'd be happy to hear about it.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? All right, we just wanted to kind of touch base with you guys and thank you for coming in, and you know, if there's something that is, obviously speak with the administration, and we're happy to hear about it and help facilitate whatever we can.
No, we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, English language arts curriculum presentation. You need us to get out of the way?
We plan to have it up on the board just in case there were any reference points that you needed to see more closely. But that's your call.
We also have talking points that kind of give it to you in a nutshell.
Thank you. Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Leaving the board table. You need like 30 remotes to make that run, right?
I'm telling you.
Come back in.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why don't you let me go out, and then I will be in your way.
No, I was talking to Brian, sorry. I thought that was gonna use that. Microphone until you throw.
Okay, so thanks for scheduling us in tonight. This has been a work in progress for quite probably at least a year and a half working on this. Just a little bit about our process for curriculum writing. We do a bulk of the research on best practices, and by we, I mean Nathan and I, because we're the literacy specialists. So we do the bulk of the research on best practices, and we do the draft writing of the document. And then we bring that back to our literacy curriculum committee, and they read and revise and suggest the initial edits and revisions. And then as we complete each section, that's sort of the process that we go through. So we complete a section, we share it back with our committee, we get feedback on it, and then we go on and fix that, fix it based on the revisions and the suggestions, and then we start in on the next section until we end up with a completed document. When the draft is completed, we present it to the CRB and we seek readers from the staff and also from the community. So at this juncture, I'd like to say thank you to Jeannie Klein and Nate Oxnard and Jerry Liptak and Leela Thompson, who are our community readers. And then to our staff members, Barbara Cook, Sarah Plater, and Erica Martin. And we did receive a lot of feedback from each person. So we feel that time you spent was critical, and it definitely helped move us forward in our document for English language arts. I would also like to say that when we write these documents, they're intended for resources for educators and for parents to get a sense of what we believe about English language arts instruction in Deerfield, and how we work to organize our instruction, our teaching, and our assessment in Deerfield in terms of the English language arts. So it's intended as a resource for best practices, but it also represents sort of the top of the mountain. So the goals of what we want for reading and for writing instruction. So through attrition or through people coming and going and new hirees, not everybody is in the same place in implementing this, but everybody is working towards this. So one of the things that's different about this document, you might recall just a couple of years back, the board approved the reading document, the English language arts for reading, right? So that was just probably about 3 years ago. So it was not up for a review, but our writing document was last approved in 2011. And the more we worked towards competency education initiatives, and the more we worked towards on like really solidifying our understanding and our work on our standards, the Common Core, and our competencies, building our competencies, the more we felt it was a natural progression to merge the two. At some point, I think it was probably sort of like a crazy huge job, and they decided to split it up into the reading and the writing. But at this juncture, we really felt strongly about bringing them back together, because reading and writing work so closely together. You can't develop one without the other. So in that sense, we decided to merge the document into a current, what you see here is the current English language arts curriculum draft. So so I guess we'll just kind of jump through, and what we really want to highlight for you today is not all of the reading piece that has already been approved and worked on, but the pieces where we really brought the writing out and merge the writing into the reading document and how that has changed compared to what we did have.
Yeah.
So the first section of a document, and what we do is we follow a guideline in how do we organize our document. The guideline comes from the SAU, so it generally has these required areas that we're expected to address. So guiding principles, what guides us? Essential environment, what do we want our classrooms to look like? What do we want learning to look like? Essential understandings, what do we want students to know and be able to do? And the essential actions, like what's required of educators and what's required of teachers. Okay, so what the expectations are for both who are involved.
Please call extension 134, please.
And then we also provide a research section on research and presentation, which we did not alter or change much for this because that was already pretty solidly in place in the reading document. And then we added in the resources, merged the resources for writing and added new resources for writing based on current practices and best practices. Okay, so guided reading or guiding principles. So the changes and the things that we sort of thought about in these guiding principles, we thought it would be helpful for you to know is we have a lot of support documents that we've been working on over the years that are in always in process and always in flux based on how, like, what as our expectations grow, as our students are able to do more and more over these years, like we have these supporting documents that help our teachers with grading, that help them understand competencies, that help them record their units. So I just thought on the little talking notes page, you'll see just sort of like the organization of this curriculum. So a curriculum is organized with competencies being at the top foremost. The competencies are our goals. That's what we're looking for, what we want students to know and be able to do. And then we have some locally developed supporting documents as well. So some of the supporting documents are the research-based standards, which were at one point adopted by the SAU and agreed upon by DCS faculty. We did a lot of work around adopting the Common Core standards. And then we've also developed these rubric outlines that outline the performance expectations for students at the competent level. I think in the future, they will likely expand to level 1, 2, 3, and 4. But it was, it's a huge job to do that. And as we're wrapping our heads around this work for competency work, the rubrics solidify what is competent, what is the goal here, what is the competency level. We also have UBD units, which are understanding by design. And that's the way you create a curriculum from the end result. So looking at what we want students to know and be able to do, and then developing the activities, the learning activities and the assessments that go with that. And then aligning that to our standards and our competencies. So let me just finish that up for a second. So then the next document you might see here is the power standards. And that was developed a few years ago. We probably spoke about that during the reading adoption. And the power standards are based on data, and they're just weaker areas that we looked at in a vertical sense, so that going from one grade to the next, to the next, to the next, there are expectations that are considered to be non-negotiables. So we aim to have those be non-negotiables for every student. And then going to the next level, we look at what the weak data was there, and we created those non-negotiables at that point. So that just kind of outlines like the general like all of these documents may seem like Greek at certain times, but it does outline the general picture of our guiding principles and some of our supporting documents, okay? So the writing anchor standards they are in the document. They discuss or they share the overarching goals of writing instruction. This is like the big picture of informational writing, of narrative writing, of opinion and persuasive writing. And then we also these are primarily from, the language is often from the Common Core document as well. And then what we did was we took that information, so that's the top of the mountain, that's the big picture. When kids graduate high school, we're aiming towards these writing anchor standards. But then what we did, if you scroll down, Nate, we applied that to what we believe to be true of writing in DCS or in our school, our K-8 school. What does this look like for us? So what do we want our good writers to be able to do? What do we want our writers to be able to do? So we've listed common beliefs that have been generated by our staff to guide our instruction. And then we also shared the common beliefs of what writers need to do or need to have and need to experience in order to develop as writers. We're gonna go to the link. Hang on. It's the language anchor standards. Oh, you know what? I think I just noticed that. Maybe try that one. I'm like, I wonder if we change we might have to go back in and change that. No, is that it? Okay.
I wonder if that bumped up a little bit.
There it is.
There it is.
Yeah. So in each section, we have anchor standards. Again, that's the big picture, the top of the mountain. What are they looking for in the end result of instruction? In terms of when students graduate as adults, what are we hoping for in terms of anchor standards for language, knowledge of language? And so we are looking at these as overarching goals to kind of help focus teachers in on the big picture. And the common beliefs are based on best practices that are embedded in the instruction and in content area. So a lot of language at the elementary level is embedded. So we teach kids language through writing instruction. We teach kids language through and vocabulary through read alouds and reading and exposure to literature. And through our content area work. So that really builds a lot of our language curriculum. And so then we also have common beliefs for each of those and for speaking and listening.
And then, so that's kind of like the big picture. And then the document also drills down into what that means for teaching and learning in the classroom.
How about I scroll and you trade places with me?
Sure. So it's broken down into 3 areas, essential environment, essential understandings, and essential actions. And so we kind of broke those areas down specifically under each one. For essential environment, that includes immersion, so language is pervasive, so across all content areas. We want to make sure that students their writing and their conventions and language are all assessed and taught in a certain way. They're experiencing language. It talks a little bit about teacher responsibility and what their practice should look like in the classroom. Modeling and how that gradual release of responsibility, how that plays a part in teaching as well, and student responsibility, how they're supposed to be engaged in the curriculum, and overall the expectations of using assessment to drive your instruction. If we scroll down to essential understandings, we updated it, the language a little bit to include some competency language. There, so we have that overarching piece so that it's all kind of connected. The expectations are there's that common thread there, and then we also laid out the written language traits of writing. It's kind of like the foundational best practice to look at the writing process, and also
which is
Are you
when we
waiting for
change
me to
one.
scroll? Keep
Yeah,
going? Okay.
it's all right.
Oh,
So
and the traits of
the
public
traits of
writing,
writing. So we worked really hard to make this, and we've got some good feedback from our readers to make this more user-friendly, so that parents and teachers have a better idea of what these common elements of writing are and what we need to look for in our students' writing. And then further up is just, it goes through the writing process, so which is gathering information, brainstorming, then drafting, and then they revise, edit, and share their product with an audience. So it basically the document kind of these three areas weave all of the teaching and the gradual release process, the I do, you do, we do, and lays it out as how it should look in the classroom. And then we did update the resources to include.
I'm scrolling. Hold on. Let me go back to. Tim, how do I
You have to
get
go all the
back to
way
the,
up.
I don't wanna go all the way up though. Where do you wanna go? How do I get back to the table of contents when I'm in?
You take the thing on the side and scroll all the way to the top.
Oh, I
It's
do?
not an automatic button.
Oh.
There's
I'm
no
ahead
fast
of my
lane.
technology. Alright, then I may as well
But
scroll
we
down.
updated the resources for teachers because it's constantly changing, kind of like our supporting documents. We have some videos in there from the reading portion.
Getting in there, hold on, this is our research and presentation, which has been in place. Alright, so,
Starts on 35. I can't read that, but I can read this.
So all the
okay.
different types of instruction are pretty much the same. We just added in some some Engage New York videos, I think. Anyways.
Yep, here we go.
And then some resources too for best practices, and then assessment. It just goes on to describe like we bolstered the summative piece of it, especially with the shift to competencies. That's something that needs to be updated. But so we've gone through the process, and I guess at this time we're asking for approval from the board to look it over and.
Let us know what to think.
Yep.
So one quick question, in terms, well, we have a couple questions, but in terms of the making this a live document that the teachers use and actively engage with as a resource, does it just live on Google Drive or do you integrate it into the classroom in other ways?
So from going forward from this point, if it's approved, we will begin working the document with the teachers in the classroom during our meeting times. We have regular meeting times set up each week, and usually one of those meetings is, of course, about student progress and student, achievement and data. And so we work on that, and then there's usually one that we focus on professional development for. And so we generally will probably have like a staff meeting where we introduce the document and maybe do a little scavenger hunt with it. And then we begin our real work in our meetings with our the grade levels that we work with.
Right. And those pieces that Kristen had mentioned, the rubrics and the thematic units that the UBD document, those are things that we work with them like throughout the school year.
Yeah, that's a lot of our summer work
Yeah.
also is putting the touches on those types of documents as we progress through. So for example, this year, the grade levels I work with are going to be working on their UBD documents, and we'll be developing that curriculum because the science curriculum has changed. So our thematic curriculums have changed. So we need to document those changes in the thematic curriculum. And so the same thing goes with, when I'm talking to a teacher about, hey, how do I teach vocabulary? I always say, well, take a look at your curriculum and let me share some books with you. There are some great books in here about, teaching kids vocabulary, but let me show you this one thing right up front. And so it's a constant conversation and flow of getting teachers familiar with the document and familiar with the resources that are in it. And then also, you know, making sure that it stays fresh so it does not just sit on Google, right? Any other questions?
Do you want to read it? I was reading.
You may not speak.
You're gonna go into
Instructionally, as this gets incorporated, what are the major differences that the students are gonna see as it's incorporated instructionally?
This year, that, you know, now versus before.
Right.
So
Moving
our writing program, we had, prior to that, we used what was called the 6 traits writing curriculum. And basically it provided the outline of the traits of quality writing, and it provided some sense of, you know, good lessons to help kids understand those 6 traits of quality writing. And then the teacher's job was to create that open flow of writing every day and to really, you know, move kids forward that way. And now we're using, at the K-5 level, we're using a program called the Lucy Calkins Units of Writing Program. And it's very, it's structured differently. So it's structured around narrative writing, and it's structured around opinion writing or persuasive writing at some of the older levels. And then it's also structured around informational text,
And I
so
think-
writing
Yeah,
informational.
the biggest difference also is like the equal weight to each one of those types of writing. It's a big shift. So
Right, so,
narrative is just as equally important as opinion or informational writing.
correct. And the lessons in that, the teachers are finding great success with those lessons. The lessons have high expectations and they're really propelling. I wish I had samples today because our 3rd grade writers are doing amazing things. So so far, we're really pleased with it. We're getting ready to have our writing assessment at the end of the month and early in June, where we look at work from all levels. And so we're looking forward to seeing what that brings in terms of data.
And will there be, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Will there be more grade level consistency as well, so that it's much more
Huge,
consistent going
huge
classroom
grade
to
level,
classroom to
yes.
classroom?
Adopting this program, the materials that we've decided to go with has created a much better consistency
Yeah,
from classroom to classroom, instruction and in student progress. Much better consistency. We're really pleased with it.
When did you make the switch to this program?
We've been sort of working a little bit at a time over the course of the last few years where one grade level was really interested in it. We've always had Lucy Calkins units of study in our school. They've always been a resource, but nobody was really using them. And then when she came out with the new units, it was really centered on what we needed in order to help our kids achieve the level of writing that the Common Core is asking for in all 3 genres, you know. So I might be an expert in teaching kids to write narrative, but the Lucy material is definitely going to help me be an expert in helping kids write informational and opinion writing, you know. So it's just created this great consistency across the way. And so we started with one grade level that was interested in updating the materials. So it was kindergarten actually that brought it back and brought it back alive. And they were interested in updating the materials, so we did. They were having great results with it. And then 1st graders were like, hey, I want some of that. So then we kind of went with the 1st grade. And once we got some feedback on 2 grade levels using it, and then that flow between 1st and 2nd grade, then we decided to purchase it for, kindergarten and 1st grade. Then we decided to purchase it for 2nd and 3rd as well. And then then we also had one teacher go in the 4th grade to the training, and she came back totally excited about it. So she was interested in helping to implement that in the 4th grade. And then we went to the 5th.
And we also had training last summer for
We did.
teachers.
So you said we've been using that for a couple of years now. Did we roll it from the kindergarten students that saw it initially? Have they had it every year going forward, or do they lose it for a year and that? So the kindergarten kids get it going
Yes,
the
so
first,
we
and then
won't,
going to second, and those
right,
kids
so what
progress
is
through it?
this is fifth grade's first year with it.
Yeah, in fourth grade, second.
So
year.
our fifth graders have not had it all the way through, but our third graders have.
So that third grade class was the
Yes.
class. So at some point, will we be able to see some data to see if it's had a positive impact by looking, say, at the third grade class and comparing it to the last year's third grade, if we can pull similar data, or at least comparing it to the fourth grade to see maybe if there's a gap there?
Yes, yes, we
I'd like-
will.
That's the easiest way for us to justify things, is just to look at numbers.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you can,
Absolutely.
if when that's available, if you can make sure we get it.
So hopefully we'll have some initial data at the end of this school year and we'll be able to share that with you.
Awesome.
Yes, Nate?
At some point, maybe at a couple points, you mentioned that there is some information or good material here for parents to see. This is a huge document that I
It
don't
is.
think any parent's gonna scroll through to find those things. So
Uh-huh.
is there a way to cut that out and put that, maybe post it somewhere, or make it
Sure.
accessible, like little sections more
Yeah.
easily accessible by the parent?
Definitely like
Yeah, we
the
could
drafting
definitely do
process
something
and
like
the
that.
writing process and the traits.
So that, you mean that just kind of create a nuts and bolts version?
I'll leave you guys in charge of that. I don't know, something that
Yeah.
parents would like to see about what's going on in their, maybe their grade or
Yeah.
or the overall philosophy, what the overall plan is.
Cliff notes.
The Cliff Note version,
For the
right, right.
All the parents of the Cliff Notes generation, now, don't forget that.
We can definitely work on that. Absolutely. Let me write it down so I don't forget it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Mr. Rock.
Hey, thanks, nice to be back.
Thank you. I think this is me.
Yep.
I was one of the readers on the CRB, I looked at that pretty closely and I was very pleased with it. I'd be happy to move that we adopt the curriculum as it was presented.
I will second it.
All right, discussion. I think we have had a pretty good discussion around this. All in favor of the curriculum as presented?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
We switch that around. Consent items. I think that's where we're at.
Yes.
3 items.
You have one is a student matter that we'll need to address in non-public and then we can come back out and take action on that. The other 2 items are to do with budget. One of them is a request, Brian would like to get started on outfitting the new classroom that we're gonna need for next year, and he has identified a couple of areas where money exists that we could take it from, so it's gonna be approximately $3,000. We just wanted to bring that to your attention, and let you know that we're gonna start working on that.
Do you need a motion to do that, or?
Yeah, because we're gonna have to move money around, so that would be a good idea.
I move that we move to allow the money for outfitting the new classroom.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, where is it coming from?
Remember the lines that we had?
There's a special ed furniture line that has not been decreased. There's actually more than enough in that line alone to take from it, so.
The fact that we're not using it specifically for special ed, is that,
We would transfer it out of that line into the regular equipment line.
but it's not needed, and this is in this current year ending next month
It's
essentially.
a surplus at this point.
It's a
Right.
surplus at this point, yeah.
Fund balance.
Yeah.
Right.
In the past, that line has been used for needs of individual students, but we haven't had that need this year, so.
Any other questions? All in favor? Aye. And the third thing?
I included some materials for you and, Deb is here,
She
was
was
here.
just here.
Deb came and spoke to us at the beginning of the year about the new server that we needed. We asked her to hang on until we get a little bit further in the budget to see where our fund balance stood. And we had come up with a couple of options earlier on. She had requested to use the technology trust fund to get the server. And she has brought the quote back forward and asked for your opinion. Our spending did close as of May 1st. Amber is aware that we had a couple of things that we were working on and she's willing to extend the deadline a little bit. But we did want to get your input into how you want to address looking at the new server. We can, I think Deb presented a few options. She had the money now. If she didn't buy Chromebooks, she could fund it with end of year money. You could use the technology trust, or you could wait and use the tech budget funds from next year's budget.
Do we know what's in the technology trust at the moment?
I don't have the balance with me. 20? I don't have my budget binder with me.
Yeah.
We would need to post a public hearing for next meeting. We wouldn't be able to take, if that's what you wanna pursue.
And do we have any indications on fund balance?
Yes, that is under 5A, and I can give it to you now, and that is about $67,000 right now.
And she's looking at the cost of a new server being 10.
So I would, seeing that we're looking a little tighter than normal, I would be more inclined to wanna take it out of the trust.
Other thoughts?
There are a lot of changes at the SAU that we were talking about at our SAU meeting. How is that impacting this? Or are we sort of going out on our own with this, or is this
No, I
in
did-
sync with what's happening at the SAU?
This, the challenge with this one is that they can't update the VM software to be compatible with what's at the SAU based on the operating system of the existing server. And it's part of the progression. It's something we need to do, whether or not we do it out of fund balance or technology trust. Or instead of Google Chromebooks.
Well, so I guess the other question is, we are operating on default next year.
Mhm.
Right, so that $15,000 cut theoretically shouldn't be in.
Yeah, there was a cut out of the technology budget for next year under the
Proposed
default.
cut, under the default as well.
Yep.
I'm trying to,
I have that for later on to give to you.
okay. So it sounds like there's other things we need to discuss before we circle back to
Yeah,
this.
if you wanna go back, do the
Can we circle
default
back to
first.
this and look at the default and a few other things and
I
then
think that's a logical approach.
circle back to it, okay. And I gotta try to pull a
So we'll
budget.
table that for now. I lost my agenda. Board reports. PTO. Andrea, hi.
I didn't go to the last PTO meetings, but if you have questions on what I'm gonna tell you, can't really answer them.
Okay.
I don't think you will. Triathlon planning is well underway. They did a whole bunch of planning for Monday to Friday next week is Teacher Appreciation Week. We got $1,017 from Hannaford Help School Program. I think that, do you know what that is? Put your receipts in, and the school that gets the most receipts wins the money. That was us, we won. We have a Twinkies fundraiser that's gonna start in about 2 weeks. We are now on Instagram, also on Facebook, and that seems to get a lot of word out. I've noticed the difference in the past 2 years since we did Facebook, so maybe Instagram will reach some more people. And this summer, we are planning to do movie nights, piggybacking the Parks and Recs department when they do their Friday night band things. None of the dates are set, but that's just something we're gonna do to try and get the community together.
Is it gonna be there or here or
It's gonna be at the
gazebo? Cool.
That's it.
Nice.
I want you to know, I went and bought a road bike yesterday. I'm triathloning.
Really?
I am.
I love it, that's awesome, awesome. Thank you, Zach.
All right. Executive board reports. We have not had a meeting yet.
Next week.
next week. So there is no report. Principals report, Mr. Smith.
Thanks. So I went to the Alice training for the active shooter training. We have the run, hide, fight in the new EOP, the school. And so I just highlighted some things that I think ought to inform, even if we don't decide to train necessarily the Alice training. They recommended active shooter drills as a necessary component where you actually practice what's going to happen, because like one of the things they did in the training was they had a Nerf gun and a guy squeezing an air horn simulating a shooting, and they said you're constrained to be in a lockdown situation as it was, and you just sit there and wait, and you can hear it coming down the hallway, and imagining being in that position was very disturbing. And for that demonstration, they gave the Nerf gun to a person in the training who had never held a gun before in his life, and he took 50 people. For the second round, we were allowed only to run and not to do anything else active, and they gave it to a SWAT sniper who only got 8. And that again was really disturbing. Like I left there shaking a bit. They do not advocate, because it's the run, hide, fight, but they do not advocate training little kids to fight. They don't have sufficient body mass to stop an intruder. They're just running into danger. And I thought that was important, because that's a part that is a sticking point for me as well. They do advocate training older students to swarm an attacker as a last resort, but it's not mandated that be part of whatever we adopt at the school. And that is only as a last resort. So they talk about from a traditional lockdown, they have an enhanced lockdown, which in addition to being in a lockdown situation, but you would barricade the door. I had mentioned in the training that with all the protests on the 20th, I had been concerned that there maybe would be an incident. He said, "Oh yeah, there was in Florida," which didn't even make the news anymore, which is disturbing on its face. But the students at that school, you can see it online, had barricaded a room. The person had gone to the door, but because the barricade made it not an easy target, they moved on. So that is more evidence for that. They talked about also like an extension cord, the little nub that you plug into. If it's an outward opening door and you throw that out and then shut the door, you can pull on that but step away from the door. Ours all open in, but I thought the example was, it's quick and easy, and you could do it in any room. You could do door stoppers going, so if somebody were to come in, we put a door stopper in here facing out. That is a deterrent at least. And there was a lot of kind of things like that if we were doing the training, that we would think about, what do we want here? What could we do here? Now, they did talk about taking care. Don't go spend $10 million on some new cool lock we put on the door, and the fire chief comes and says, you can't have that on the door. So to be careful and involve the different people with that. Evacuation training means giving students permission to smash a window if that's what it takes to get out. And that probably is something the board would have to weigh in on. But on the first floor, certainly, we have the emergency windows, but they could all be open in about a quick minute if that was necessary, and if the students had permission to do that. And that was really the crux of what they were talking about, is that you have to give the students permission to be in control of their survival rather than being directed to. We listened to the phone call from Columbine from the librarian, and it was probably, I don't know how long it was, but it was plenty long enough where they were out in the hallway setting off pipe bombs, and it was a kid you could hear say, why don't we just run? There was an exit from the library on the opposite side of where they came in, and she said, no, we're supposed to stay, everybody stay down. And that kid, in fact, got up and ran out the door, but the rest of them did not, and then they came into the library afterward. And so that was because they were following their training. Just in a panic situation, you shut down, you can't think, and so you do what you've been told, and that's what we've been told. And so the drill, they advocate that you do the drill, and you have to kind of talk that out with and give people permission, you do what you need to do. They did talk about the idea that that's the temporary loss of accountability of students, which I would hate. That if something's going on and the kids are empowered to run, some might run into the woods and we would lose track of them. But what the trainer said was, would you rather have 100% accountability of not alive kids? Because they've had that in other schools. And I thought that was not just a scare tactic. Numbers have been posted on exterior windows. We had talked about that before, so that on the first floor, that if law enforcement's outside, they know which room inside corresponds. And we're considering days that might work for staff training, begin the implementation of Run, Hide, Fight. We just are trying to figure out different days that might work to do a more comprehensive training. Current enrollment's 530, projected kindergarten is 56 plus 2 possible retentions. SAS testing began yesterday. We had 5th and 6th grade today. And the teachers, I walked around just kind of checking in, and they really had it figured out this year. It was awesome. But they also did a lot of work toward normalizing the test environment so that it was just like the kids were taking a test and not like it was this thing that's coming to get us and we gotta, and it really, that wasn't present. It was awesome. So the teachers did an awesome job at that. Curriculum night art show was yesterday. Well attended and seemed to go well. New student information system is chosen, ALMA, and that should make it a lot more simple, the interface between parents and the school, which I know is something that was an issue. Tricky Trays next Friday. The car, that's going to be one of the prizes, which is pretty exciting. Will be on premises so people can inspect it at some point. 2nd grade, this was really cool. So I had talked before, somebody had told me to look up a particular school. God, I can't remember, but it's in New Hampshire. What are they doing? What kind of things are they doing? And so I did. And one of the things was they really involved students in collecting data. And we had been talking about the kitchen also. And so I went to, what is that group called when all the different grades come? It's on Monday.
When?
No, the one, the liaisons, GLL. Yeah, sorry about that. GLL meeting and they put this idea out, like, why don't we, this is how do we get more kids to eat in the cafeteria? That would be a cool thing. Maybe talk to the cafeteria and see what we could do. In the 2nd grade, like, ran with it, and they had all their kids do these surveys and what do you like to eat, what don't you like to eat, and they only did it within the 2nd grade, but then they put the data and presented it to the cafeteria and me, and they had all these charts. That was really cool. The kitchen laminated the charts. They're going to put them up, and they also are going to use that example and put it out to the rest of the kids, because there was some, apparently kids want to eat breakfast all the time, even for lunch, which I was surprised about. I didn't think that would be a huge hit, but it was like 90%. They went crazy for it.
Breakfast for lunch?
Yeah.
McDonald's does it.
So and there were other ideas too, which I thought were actionable that would help the kitchen, and she's looking to implement some of those as well. But she's doing it in a thoughtful way, so that's cool. And the camera grant, that's you?
Yes.
Okay.
Or you can, it came, the
Yeah,
approval
the
letter
grant
came,
came through.
the final approval. We had the
Cool.
conditional approval and then the final.
So we need to discuss the second half of that as well.
Could I ask a little bit about Alma? I know that when Chris presented at the SAU, he said that there was the possibility that some schools would be up and running by September.
It's looking like it might happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
The company, I think, told us they could do it.
Okay.
So now we are in the process of coming up with a schedule to make it happen. It's gonna be very difficult, but Chris is on it, and each school has been asked to submit a team
Okay.
with all stakeholders included.
So MMS will go away.
Yes.
And that will include staff training.
Yes.
All right. Excellent.
Scheduling will be done with MMS through this year, at all the schools. And then, that will be a separate training later in the.
So the scheduling, so MMS will run in the background basically. for the
Right,
scheduling.
so any middle school student will have a printout MMS schedule, but in the grand scheme of things, we can make our own if we really wanted to, using Word, so.
I don't, do we
Can we
need
go
to
back
talk
to
about?
just the current enrollment?
Sure.
So 5:30, that current 5:30, is that next year's project, or is that today?
That's today.
I thought we were 5:17 for some reason.
Yeah, so
That's 13 more.
we had a couple of kids today, so the kids are coming.
Okay, so 5:30, so next year's projection then puts us at 56 for kindergarten's about the same size as current year, so we should be about 5:30 next year?
That's slightly bigger than the eighth grade.
Oh,
the current eighth
we have to
grade.
take that,
So
what's
we're
eighth
gonna
grade
go up a
this year,
little bit.
40?
Eighth grade is 46 right now.
So we're actually gonna be up 10, so we're
Yeah.
gonna be about 5:40?
Yeah.
So we're getting back up into that. About as big as we've been in quite some time.
Yay, all right,
It's a good problem to have.
it is.
Town's
Except,
growing.
except building spaces.
Be a great time if you're trying to sell a house in this town, cause they're turning like fire.
That is the word. Is there anything on pace or?
Chris
that's kind of-
Motika had communicated to Kristen, I just spoke with her earlier, that not moving to tier 1 does not automatically disqualify you from tier 2. So the status quo could continue if that's.
Which means funding?
Hmm?
Which means we would get some funding for additional work, or the funding is not there?
So I don't have the details for that, but I know that tier 2 is, you have access to the materials, and there are some trainings which we were allowed to go to this year, even though in order to build capacity within the PACE framework, which was useful, because the terminology, right, is pretty opaque to the public, but to the teachers to some extent as well. And so having somebody new go to that, if that's available, would not be a waste of time, because it helps inform the discussion, even if you just continue. I mean, the QPA work will continue, it's good work. And so if somebody went and got kind of the like kernel version at the training, they come back and they can have a more informed discussion. That helps to bolster the QPA efforts. So, yeah, if they would give you that training for free, I would take it.
Right. All right, moving on to curriculum review board, Mr. Oxnard.
At the CRB meeting, a couple weeks ago, there were a few things. One was that, we touched on the social studies and science situations as far as competencies and grading and where that stands. The competencies and the performance indicators have been adopted and okayed by the CRB, and that's been true all year. That was a requirement for last year's, I think from the state for last year. But what hasn't really been finished yet is to then take those competencies, those kind of general frameworks, and then take the curriculum and put them into those competencies. And so that work has not been completed yet, which is why you may have noticed it hasn't been on the report card. Those two have not been on the report card this year. And so that's partly just sort of due to this transition to competency education. The English ELA and the math has been a priority. But within that, and as part of the presentation we just heard, there have been some of the reading that they're doing is actually in the context of science. And so they're working in science, they're working in social studies into those different parts that are in the grade book. And so the work is targeted to be finished this spring. And so certainly by the fall, there will be, when the report card is looking different anyway, which is the next item on here, there will be social studies and science will be on that. Speaking of the report card changing, the work study habits will be on the report card next year. And so we were talking about that. There is still some work to be done over the summer by the CRB and other various teachers to outline what that will look like. They are going to be planning on a forum this spring for parent input and collecting, informing parents and also asking for input from the parents about how to roll this out and how to address these skills on the report card. But they also would love to float their final proposal to us in time to then get it okayed and announced, presented, rolled out to the public by September 1st or by the end of the summer. And the idea of coming up at that cookout, if we do the cookout again, the open house night would be a good time to do that. The catch is that they don't think, the teachers don't think they can get that work done by our August 1st or 2nd or 3rd meeting. They were thinking if we had another meeting or a later meeting in August, then if it was just for the purpose of seeing their proposal for the report card with the work study habits, they could present it to us. Assuming we would okay it, then they could roll it out to the parents the week after.
I think it's pretty important.
They would like,
It's
they,
been
yeah, and I think it's.
phenomenally opaque. So.
Right, and so I think the idea of presenting to us, I think is a great one, and so I would love to support that if possible, but finding our schedules to mesh in that way will always be a challenge, but I would like to push for having a second August meeting if we could.
Was there a suggested date that they could be ready by? Do you know?
I didn't get a date, I think,
Let's give them a date.
I was gonna say maybe.
If we're gonna have a second
When's our
meeting,
first day of school, 24th, 27th?
I think it's.
The teachers come back Monday, or they come back, yeah. 27th is teachers,
Yeah,
it's a
and
Monday.
29th is, the 29th.
So it'd have to be that week, because they're not back.
I think if you did the 15th,
what, the meeting?
yeah.
They'd be, I think there were enough teachers who would come in before the
During the
start.
summer?
Yes, well, if it was like the second or third week of August,
Okay.
there would be enough around who'd be willing to come in, was the feeling I got.
I'm open to that.
Yeah, I at the moment don't have anything scheduled for August, so.
I don't have anything scheduled for that part of August.
And we could do the third Wednesday, I guess. If we're meeting the first Wednesday, we could do another one 2 weeks later.
One,
Are we putting
The
this in
21st?
calendars?
How
Or
about
the
the 20
22nd.
How about the 21st or 22nd?
22nd is a Wednesday, if you wanna stick to Wednesday.
Sure.
It's fine with me.
Want to say 22nd?
Sure.
Of August,
Yep.
at what time, sir?
Let's make it 6, be consistent.
Yeah, 6.
August 22nd. This is what our world has come to, is we all know that if we don't put it in our calendars right now.
And send a reminder, please. This calendar.
And we're meeting on the first, it must be the first. So there's 5 Wednesdays that month.
We usually skip July, but we were talking about doing July this year.
I think we need to run right through, to be honest with you.
I think we're gonna run right through. I agree with you.
No vacation.
Super fast internet. Anything else?
Yes, the ELA curriculum was today, obviously, and next month, they were planning on presenting the music curriculum, the world language curriculum, and the health and wellness curriculum for our approval. So if we could get those on the agenda, that would be
All
great.
in one night?
All in one night.
Was this just a healthy year in the cycle? Cause I know everything sits on typically a 7-year cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are not nearly as big as this one was, so these are pretty quick.
I thought we had them staggered a little bit so that every year.
Oh, they are, there's a bunch of them. They're pretty much
Seems like we've
like,
got more this year than normal.
We had a couple that weren't ready in time.
yeah.
Okay.
I know music got pushed out.
And wellness got pushed out.
Yeah.
Let's go with that. Makes more sense.
That's it,
All right.
thank you.
Building committee report. Shelley's not here. Ken, do you have anything?
I do not,
You wanna talk about the demographics study?
not at this time.
Okay.
Can
How
I,
about, oh, go ahead.
and this is, maybe doesn't fall into building committee, but maybe it does, but it's just input. We had some more sinkholes up on the upper field.
Yeah.
And I spoke to the landscaper after he came out. And one of the holes he was in, basically as far as he could go with his machine, he said he dug about a 20-foot diameter. He said he was down probably 14, 15 feet, and he was pulling out nuggets and filled the dump truck full of nuggets. He said that one's gonna be a continuous problem because he couldn't find anything solid at the bottom of the hole. And without bringing in something bigger and heavier and chasing it all the way through. But the other comment he made, and it's a a little bit concerning, and he said we may wanna look into it, and it's outside of his wheelhouse. But what he is noticing is a lot of those holes are opening up on the perimeter of our leach beds, or on the perimeter of the leach bed. And he thinks what's happening is that as the leach bed is doing what it's supposed to do, it's pushing material down and causing it to happen. And he's concerned that the leach bed could fail prematurely because
Everything around it's getting washed away.
all the filter sand that's in the leach bed, trying to do what it's supposed to do, is
It's
getting
gonna fall
pushed into those holes and it's falling in. So it was more of just like a heads up that he called to give me. But I think we need to maybe start thinking about addressing that area
Sooner than
later. And I got some opinion from him. He thinks it's gonna be a pretty big job, cause he thinks to do it right, we're gonna need to get down about 25 feet. Basically take the hill out, stir it up, and put the hill back. And that's gonna be to do it right.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a pretty mammoth undertaking.
And it's gonna wreck the sports fields, which will have to be rebuilt on top of it.
You're redoing all your sports fields. He actually suggested, he said if it's possible to just, if that plateau isn't there for a specific reason, he suggested it might be easier, better and cheaper to pay somebody to scalp the whole hill, drop it down 20 feet, haul out whatever they find, and then set the new set of fields right there and basically just drop it down 25 feet or whatever it is.
Would that require resetting the entire septic field?
Yeah, but I mean, if you go up there and start spooning around, you're probably gonna destroy the leach
Septic
field
field anyways.
anyway, so you're probably gonna be redoing it anyway. The other comment he made is one of the holes, he went in about 3 feet, he said he started pulling trash and debris out of it, he said he pulled out a big blue tarp, a bunch of metal, and a bunch of other stuff, and he said he dug out everything he could find and threw it in the dump truck and hauled it off, but
So
doesn't know what's up there at this point.
it was not clean fill, in other words.
It is a surprise, as he said, every time he goes up there to fix them, what he finds is always a bit of a mystery. And obviously, we've had him fix, 20 holes at this point now, it seems like.
We spent 10 grand last year doing it. That's got it.
I
He
know.
probably spent 10 grand doing that.
Yeah, I don't think he's charging us, I think he's being pretty, is he being fair?
He is charging it.
No, I'm saying, I don't think he's charging us.
The holes and stuff.
No, but I'm saying, I don't think he's charging us, I don't think he's being hard on us by any means, I don't know what the bills are, but.
No, he charges us for the trucks, he doesn't charge us for the drivers.
Okay.
So I know he does give us a break there, but he is charging us emergency visits for the fields.
Yeah, well,
The field's a big problem.
it is, so it's just, I think maybe we need to start having that longer, more difficult conversation on it.
Could we put that on the agenda for next month and maybe I don't know if you guys can get some opinions on what's going on up there? That would be great from some professionals
Yeah, I mean,
to just take a look.
maybe call, some of the, Mark, call the Youngs and see if either one of them can come out and talk to you.
Can I say another thing? I forgot a thing.
Sure.
So, did you see the employee parking lot?
Yeah.
The city came and fixed it for free, and it's awesome.
The town.
Market.
The town, yes, right. I can't believe I didn't say it, like it was really on my mind and I got sidetracked.
They
That's a
run the grader
huge deal.
through?
He came and dropped like all kinds of dirt and then graded it. It's unbelievable, night and day, and awesome. Like, they came through like they said they would. Yeah, and I'm really sorry I didn't say that earlier. Dang it.
Good.
Nice.
Okay, that,
I have one other thing on that. This is the building committee still.
yeah, we're on the building committee still.
We were talking about throwing dates around to meet with all the clubs in the town to get together our CIP.
Right.
Have we had any responses? Because that meeting was gonna be next week, so it sounds like we're not meeting next week.
I have not heard anything.
So I went and approached, Dick Pittman and asked him if he could help facilitate this. He said he hadn't heard anything about it yet, and he was gonna try to get something going. I told him the dates were coming up. He apologized, but said he'd make it happen, but obviously the dates we have aren't gonna work at this point.
Right.
So I spoke with him again today, and he said he'd get with John, and I said if somebody could please get back to you, Patty, so that we could try to
Thank you.
close that circle of communication.
See what they've got
Yeah,
in terms of schedule. So we did get the demographic study, but we'll discuss that next time.
Correct.
So they're still revising it? I would hope.
Yeah.
Okay. Safety committee report, we aren't gonna discuss.
Take
That's
that off.
Yeah, we killed it.
Right. Alright, fiscal year 18 update. How we doing?
As of right now, the balance is $67,000. Like I said, Amber did cut off spending as of May 1st, with the exception of she knew about the classroom, she knew that there was the discussion about the server, and any things that come along that are necessary will be approved by me and then by Amber. So it's not that you can't continue business, it's just she wanted the major purchases done so that the books could be closing on June 30th.
Is there any, is that, you said $60,000 fund balance?
67, yeah.
$67,000 fund balance. Have we gone and is that depleting the lines that we've already spent what we have to out of, or do we expect that number to increase as we close the books?
I think it will increase, possibly at the next meeting, but it may take a little longer. She'll have a better handle on what we're getting in for revenue, because if we get more revenue and that makes a difference. I think as we start to close lines, like Chris and I and Trish and Brian have been working on the budget and looking at lines that we know we aren't gonna expend, and as we go through those, it releases up more money as well. So we'll continue to do that. I would anticipate it increasing.
Can I just say, I did like blanket POs for things that we use every month, so, I mean, there will be
hold
money
it,
going
yeah.
back in after, so.
Yeah.
Because I just wasn't sure how much we would have to be spending for the next 2 months.
So that brings us back around to our discussion of the server. It sounds like we're going to wind up with more than the 67,000. What that final number is, we have no idea.
I mean, I guess the second part of that for me is, so when we did the default, we reduced the tech lines by the 15K. I just tried to hold the default.
Do you wanna skip on the agenda, go back to the last day of school and go right to the default?
Yeah,
Since we're talking about money.
budget anyway.
So Brian and Chris and I spent a significant amount of time going through the budget, and Amber had done the default for us, which we had shown you. Just get this to you. So I asked her to create another column, and we sat down and went through line by line, and we have a proposed changes column that we've added for fiscal year 18-19. It's the dark gray column, second to the last. So now what you're seeing is the 18-19 proposed, what we got in the default budget, what the difference was, and then what we are proposing to you tonight to do with our bottom line. So you can look in the right-hand column difference and see what that proposal means. So for instance, if you go to the first yellow shaded area at the bottom, we proposed $1,200 for instructional equipment repair. We got the default, which was $1,500. We are asking for $1,200, which means that's $300 less than the default. So the $300 in the right-hand side with the parentheses means that's $300 less than what we got in the default. So we went through and did that for each section. So when it's minus, it's less than we asked for in the default, and when it's not in parentheses, it's asking for additional money from what we got in the default. As you go through the entire document, we get to the bottom, we have $22,000 to spare that we did not designate tonight. We have some hiring that we're still doing, and I know, for instance, that one of the positions is going to come in on the scale higher than we had budgeted for. So I'm recommending at this point that we not allocate that $22,000. So what we have allocated is the keeping the increases for salary. We reinstated the co-curricular section that Cindy had asked for, which was for more trips for sports, which was for increases in use of officials. What she submitted is what she thinks we will need, so we restored that to her original request. I think transfer to food service changed a little bit. We increased Go ahead, Zach.
Oh, I was gonna let you run through it, then I got a couple
We
questions.
increased the professional dues, for instance, because the dues went up and that's a contractual item. So it's, there are pluses and minuses throughout. The board expenses, we had proposed $1,500, the default gave us $500. We put it back to $1,500 because we wanted to do the barbecue. And then the other question that we had, school board salaries were restored in the default. So if you choose to forego your salaries as you had proposed, you would have that $2,000 that we could move to general board expenses, and you would be able to use that for other things.
The back to school
That's right.
barbecue, okay.
That's right. So that's something that we did not do. I didn't wanna reduce your salaries and propose that unless you.
I wouldn't call that a salary.
I didn't touch that one.
You get to do that twice? It's a little ironic.
So there aren't a ton of lines because the default wasn't that different, but
So,
you don't have to act tonight if you need some time to look through it.
I guess, one that just jumped out at me was line 330.
Okay.
And I don't think we have the appendixes, but, contracted services under maintenance.
Yep.
We, $18,000.
Was that the gym floor, Chris? Do you remember? Contracted services, 18,000. That was to repair the gym floor, I
That
think.
sounds right. It was to
I believe
refinish
that's
and repair.
correct,
Yeah.
So.
But the refinishing was in that 18 grand.
It got refinished. No, I thought that was just the repair and the refinishing was.
I thought it
thought
was
we had-
all lumped together.
I thought it was separate.
I think that was separate. I
Cause
think
the
the 18
18 grand
was to
was, now
fix.
you're saying it, I thought 18 grand was for repairs.
Right.
I don't know what the 842
And I think that got taken care of, right?
So, and my understanding is that Mike has repaired some of the floor, but now we need to have it refinished.
Okay.
Well, yeah, he went
So-
back and
And so the money to refinish is somewhere else?
It should be
So-
in there, but it's not the 18,000. The 18,000 was just repair.
But we had issues with the floor, so Mike has cut out and put new pieces in,
correct.
and it didn't cost 18 grand.
No.
That's awfully nice.
Yeah, he had to sand down each individual piece.
Okay.
So it matched
He's
the,
able to do a lot.
He, I think he exercises a certain level of OCD in this,
Okay.
and so it's much better now than it was before. I haven't noticed the bubbles there.
there's no more bubbles,
There are none, okay.
yeah,
That's
that I've
fantastic.
seen in the last week.
Yeah.
But there's also hasn't been any humidity in there, so that could affect it too, so,
Let's hope not.
yeah,
We're
exactly.
talking now and it's bubbling while we're talking. Okay, so that was that. The school board salaries, I wanna make yet another attempt to kill that.
Okay.
Can you point me in the right direction of where that is?
It is.
244,
Is it 240?
237.
I'm sorry.
237.
So.
Yep.
I move that we reduce 237 to $1 and move the money into
244.
244.
I'll second that.
244, and that allows us the discretion to use it for whatever we want to use it for.
For
But
your
not
board
paid.
board expenses.
Correct.
And then-
So we have a motion and a second to reduce 237 to $1 and increase 244 to 24.99. Is that right?
That's correct.
Any discussion? All in favor?
No, hold on, Jim, your math is wrong there.
No, yeah, we're proposing
Oh,
1,500.
it's 500, I'm sorry.
So if you
So it
could
was
just,
1,500, so
maybe the motion could just be to move the 2,000 to that
the
line,
1999.
Yeah,
and then whatever we end up doing with it.
so so I'm proposing we move the money from, move 1999 from 237 to, line 240, sorry, I lost it.
244. All right. So, any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
We can kill it one way or another.
So we
Gonna get
don't,
rich doing this.
Maybe that's why it failed at the,
we don't need
at the
to
balance.
take action tonight. We have plenty of time because this is next year's budget. So if you wanna take it and look at it and see if you,
I guess the only
Are
other
in
part of
agreement.
this is the technology
Mhm.
lines. Which are, should be. I'm sorry, I don't mean to make this drag on, but. there's actually a couple of questions when we get into,
It's in different places.
yeah, so I guess one of them is during the budget process, we reduced the stipend for Deb's summertime to reflect what we suspect the per diem will be for the new hire. That
But it
sounds
sounds like,
accurate?
Yeah, and the new hire is gonna be higher than we budgeted for.
Okay, so we can leave that alone. And then that $15,000 reduction, I just wanna see it. So I wanna see the line, because I don't recall that
We
coming out in
took,
default.
so line 100, we proposed 23. The default actually gave us 38. So we are, which was a $15,000 difference. So we haven't obviously told Deb what's happening to that line because we haven't had this meeting and this discussion. But we were gonna propose taking 5 of that, so giving the replacement network and computers to $28,000. So that would
So
only be a
that-
$10,000.
But that $10,000 that we're leaving there, that we
Yeah.
weren't budgeting for
Yeah.
next year,
Yeah.
covers that server
it does.
on July 1st.
Mhm.
This is what I was trying to get to route back to before, so.
Right.
So, as long as, we didn't budget for that we didn't budget for it for next year anyway, so we didn't have an expectation for it, so.
Right.
My thought is if we can hold off till July 1 and purchase the server July 1, we can do it out of the budget.
It hasn't failed at this point, as far as I know. So-
No, it's just when the updates are done at the SAU, you won't be able to update.
Okay.
Is that gonna have an operational
one of
impact
those-
on us, or?
One of those updates.
It's a backup server, isn't
I
it?
don't know, yeah, I think so. I don't know when Mary's doing those. I know we have it, it just hasn't been done, because we've been doing the student information system and the HR module.
But if she can schedule, say, last.
Yeah.
For those,
Yeah.
you know, it'd be minimal.
I don't understand
impact.
what is, and we're all. is
I wanna see if Deb's still here,
I
is
don't
that,
understand what that means.
if she's still here, should we see if we can talk to her, Jim?
Yeah, cause if this is
Yeah,
our
I don't know
main
what
server,
that
it's a different,
Or
I don't
guess
I feel like it
understand
was
the first,
backup for some reason.
I thought it was a backup too.
She's gone.
It's not capable. Current backup system.
Yeah, our current backup system.
It's not capable of new upgrades allowed to make.
Pager?
That's useful.
I think we're okay. I think we're, okay.
Oh, okay.
I think she's talking about it communicating with the backup system, I'm not sure. Emergency funds
So,
this fall.
well, I guess Jim, here's the other thought, so she says if she delays her Chromebook purchases. So
She could do the
she can do the
Chromebooks.
server now and do $10,000 worth or whatever she needs for Chromebooks on July 1. That might be a more,
So we don't need a server now.
And we can live without the Chromebooks.
we can live without the, at
It's
this
not
point.
gonna, yeah, they're not gonna be used this year anyway.
So, I guess we have $10,000 more than we allotted for, I'm sorry, we have $10,000 more than we had requested for next year, so if we can just hold off on something till July 1st, so if she can push the Chromebooks off till July 1,
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
get the server. Everybody's happy.
But we need to approve that, I believe,
Do we?
don't we? Or-
If she's already got the money to do it, then that's fine. I think she was looking for advice and asking what you wanted her to do and what funds you wanted her to do it with.
And I leaves
I
the
can
trust fund
share- I
alone.
can tell her what we wanna do.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And the only other, in this, we're fully in the default, we are funding our additional position for,
We didn't add the position because we lost that in the default, but we had a position in the default that we are switching from special ed to the classroom teacher so that we can
so
get
we're
that
staff where we
classroom
want to be.
teacher. We're
Okay.
staying, yes, even with the default, but we're switching personnel.
Okay.
Since we're talking Chromebooks, are we any closer to having a technology improvement plan or any discussion about that? That was one of our goals, and
I have not worked on that with Charlotte. It's something that has gotten pushed to the back burner at this point. It's something that I intend to sit down with her and Deb before Deb leaves. Spend some time on that. So just one other, as we're talking kind of fiscal year end and default budget, it's something that we've talked about for a while and was also actually brought up in public comments tonight is our website is of questionable navigation ability. And I wanted to throw it out in front of the board that we allocate some funds into upgrading and moving to a WordPress platform.
I don't know what any of that means, but it sounds wonderful.
So that it winds up more accessible, easier to navigate.
Is that a,
So similar to what the rest of the SAU
We could
has.
use the platform that the rest of the SAU, and WordPress is pretty robust behind the scenes in terms of what it can do, so.
what's it?
Takes a little bit more work to administer, but if you have somebody who's doing that for the SAU, then
We do.
it's certainly more robust. That's definitely true, but there's a lot more
So the reason
work on it.
why we appear differently on the SAU site than everybody else
We're
does?
an old Google website.
Okay.
And we could also talk to the people that, I know all the tech coordinators work together with a consultant, and maybe it makes sense when Deb's replacement comes on board, see what kind of experience she has with web stuff,
Development.
and she may be able to do some of it herself.
Right, but I know that it's something that Deb has taken on to kind of in addition. So I don't wanna just leave it so
Yeah.
that it gets pushed to the back, cause it's probably our main conduit for communication with the public at this point. Not many people watch this, maybe some do. So I wanted to suggest maybe putting $2,500 into that effort
Is that enough to,
to migrate, cause we're not building the site, it's migrating all the content, formatting.
Is it enough to migrate? I mean, that's step one, obviously,
Well,
but I think the whole thing,
I think-
it needs to be overhauled.
well,
We have the
you can spend a
template.
lot of money on a website.
Oh,
have-
yeah, absolutely.
We have the
Totally agree.
template, other schools have already set it up.
we don't need an Amazon, like, we just need cleaning,
And
easy
that
to
was-
navigate.
We have a theme.
Yeah, and
We
the
bought a theme.
intention was for the whole SAU to look the same, have the same buttons, go to the same place for information, so that,
Sounds so logical.
And once
So-
you have a website, it doesn't have to be done. Like
No.
if you wanna add something,
Yeah.
that's the easy part. It can change whenever you want, like that's the, WordPress is easier to do that in, and there's like modules you can add if you wanna add different functionalities, so.
It's very user
Is
friendly.
that like a subscription type service that you have to
No,
pay for?
you buy a theme and basically it creates a framework that people who are not coding can put things into and easily move them around.
So the theme is the one-time expense?
And I think the
I think
SAU
we have
bought the
I think
theme,
we have
which
it.
is
So
why
that's
they
the
all look the same.
template for whatever,
Yeah.
it
okay.
just needs to happen.
So
The
then
work
the
needs to
money that say the $2,500, that's
Even though
the-
themes aren't expensive.
But is that to fund just
It would
paying
be,
someone
it
to
would be
migrate
somebody
it
who
over?
knows how to lay things out nicely and think logically about how people move through a website.
And is that an internal stipend of somebody, or is that a,
It could be, or we could consider somebody who's a designer to kind of give us some guidance.
okay,
And I know there are people in town who do it professionally who might be an interesting resource to kind of come in and give advice.
I'm all for it, but it's well outside my wheelhouse.
So, 2,500 is probably the low end of doing it. If we wanted to go, say, 3,000, 3,500, I think it would easily cover our costs for the migration.
So the question is where do you find it?
Well, we have surplus coming up.
Okay, so
But is 75 that surplus already spoken for per the voters?
yeah,
If you wanna fund the warrant article, you need the $75,000. That's,
Right.
you'll get the 75 that you raised, and then the other 75 is funded if you have enough of a fund balance.
but it's
And at the
funded.
moment, we don't have that, we have 67.
That's right.
So
So
you
we
would
would
fund
get
67.
To the
So
fund,
there,
but
right,
not to the migration.
Unless we make a motion to use it ahead of the end of the year.
I'm not gonna,
So
I
we
don't
would-
wanna
we would
go
fund
after any of the fund
64.
balance stuff right now.
Okay.
It is too tight and I'm just not,
we could also look at it out of next year and have it be summer work.
I'd feel a little more comfortable, I think, with that.
And
I'd even be willing to take some of that school board general
money
that we
That's what I was
just
thinking
found. I mean, we need we estimated the barbecue was $1,000. So, I mean, I really want us to be able to do that again. I think that was great. So I mean, we need $1,000 basically to cover that, and then I'm willing to, you know, if we wanna use that money to help with that migration, I'm all on board with that.
Right.
And I can get some more information from Mary regarding what we bought for the other schools and what.
And it's really going to be the work of moving it, formatting it, laying it out right. It's not gonna be the actual
It's already
word,
set
you
up.
already have the
Yeah.
WordPress theme. So.
Okay.
So for next year, but maybe start in July, it'd be lovely to see it roll out. It'd be lovely to see it roll out for the start of school.
You get skinny and start pushing treats on.
I bought a whole dozen, I bought them to share.
Thank you.
And I'm starving.
Is it almost food break time? So I guess we don't need a motion for that right now, but I did wanna throw that at the board. And does the board wanna give any guidance in regards to how much we'd be kinda comfortable spending up to? We found 1,000 with our
Yeah, so I mean, it's.
school board, so now we're down to
$2,000 you need.
$2,000 or $1 to $2,000. You wanna do that off of the,
Can we pull some of that maybe, I mean, I don't know what the Chromebook expenditure was, but if we don't need all 10 for the Chromebooks.
I think a website might be a little bit more.
I don't know, if you wanna, do you wanna take this and look at it, and then we can make all the decisions at one time?
Let's do that. But I, if you guys wanna start asking around
Sure.
about, let's make our website user friendly.
Okay.
Anything else on fiscal year 18 or default budget? Nope. Okay, so let's now talk last day of school.
So Brian and Chris and I worked on this. We received, a lot of schools have been asking for waivers from the state. You probably heard about it. It was like on the news, and the state said, no waivers, you need to get your time in. But what they did do is issue a memo that indicated the minimum standards require you to have 5 days built in to make up for snow days. So we always add that onto the end of our calendar. That's how we do it. So we had gotten to the 5, and then we had gone above. We added the 15 minutes to get a couple of days knocked off. They sent guidance that said, even if as long as you meet your instructional hours, then you don't have to go that 188 days or 85, wherever we were at, as long as the instructional hours add up. So Brian and Chris, we refigured it 3 or 4 times to make sure we had it right, took out for our early releases, delayed openings and such. And with that, if we go strictly by instructional hours, the kids could get out on Tuesday, the 19th.
And if we have no more snow days.
It's 90 today.
Bite your tongue.
Might snow tomorrow.
And then the staff would still need to be here until Friday the 22nd. And Brian and Chris would be responsible for professional development or training or whatever, however they saw fit to make those days up with staff. So it's up to you. You can have the kids stay, you can have them stay one of those days, all of those days, none of those days.
So right now we're on the 21st. So
We were at the 21st.
Correct.
Coming back to the 19th.
And now we're coming back to the 19th.
It'll be an early release on the 19th, so.
Now, going into next year, was my understanding that we have 5, is that what you just said, is we have 5 days?
No, you're supposed to incorporate 5 days, we add them on the end, so we don't build a 190-day calendar or 185-day calendar. We add the snow days onto the end, so that we make them up.
Okay. So I guess, so the question is do we wanna let the kids start somewhere on the 19th?
Because the 20th and 21st would be very effective educational days, I'm sure.
But you could just as easily say the 18th and the 19th would be very effective educational days. I mean, at that point in the year, it's.
I know. I'd make a motion that we dismiss school on the 19th.
Second.
Discussion.
Nate might agree with me, I don't know, I feel like school days are school days and we should try to,
But we've hit our requirement.
That's the minimum requirement.
yeah, isn't more school better?
So how high are we aiming, and is more school better, right?
It is.
Well, you're asking questions. Make your case.
I don't know, I just feel like, I mean, I understand the, I understand the need at that point of the year, the kids are done, I get it, mine are done at that point of the year, but I also wonder if a couple of extra days, or even maybe splitting the difference and calling it one more extra day, cause that would put us on a Wednesday if we let them out on the 20th. And then you need the staff on Thursday and Friday to satisfy contract.
Right now, we're on the 21st, so staff would come on Friday and Monday, right?
So if we cut back to the 20th, find the happy medium, staff still goes home at the end of the week and they get their summer. And we're getting another day of educational value into our children.
And the parents don't have to find babysitters.
And it's one less, well, no, it's, I mean, the parents are still on the hook for Thursday and Friday that week.
Yeah, okay.
The staff is here for the
Well,
week.
half of Wednesday too,
Half a Wednesday.
if you go that way.
Yeah, I mean, that argument of, you know, what are you really doing at that point in the year, but you could say that for the 18th or the 17th.
Yeah, it's always gonna be the last 2 days, whatever the last 2 days are.
Right, so I mean, I don't know, another 8 or 10 hours of education can't hurt.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
Well, you're sort of saying that time in school is a waste, and so I don't know that.
You've have both said it and have both admitted it, that the kids are checked out. And I get that you want to add the educational value to those days. But how are you going to add that educational value? It's great to say that, you know, that's the intended plan for it. I don't see it happening. Sorry, I'm being a little cynical about that and maybe pessimistic that
I mean, if that's the case,
we've met the minimum, and I understand what you're saying about the, you know, met the minimum,
but that's like saying competent for everybody is good enough, we don't want anybody competent with distinction.
No, that's, the kids are checked out, the parents, I think, would be more enthusiastic about getting out that much earlier rather than going, oh God, I gotta find babies, you know, childcare for 2 extra days now. I think they want their kids out of school so they can all start summer vacation. That's my opinion.
By the end
I
of
just,
summer,
I
want my
don't
kids in
see,
school.
I don't see any value of doing the extra day. That's my opinion.
I don't necessarily wanna drag the staff back on a Monday to wrap things up, but
I agree with that.
But I
Yeah,
also,
I agree with that too.
I also can't see how an extra 8 hours of instructional time is going to hurt any child in this building.
All right, any other discussion? So we have a motion for the 20th at this point, or excuse me, the 19th, excuse me.
The 19th is the Wednesday, is that what we said?
The Tuesday.
Tuesday, that's the motion on Tuesday. All right, all in favor of the 19th, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
It fails.
So then what does it stand as?
So you gotta make a motion.
So I'll
That
move
motion
that,
fails.
I'll move that we dismiss on the 20th.
Second.
I'm going to tell my children that you did this.
Just don't tell mine.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we've discussed this. All in favor?
Aye.
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 We're out on the 20th.
Okay,
And teachers are on the 22nd.
their
on the
days,
Friday.
their days are done the 22nd. That gets them to,
Okay.
If the kids burn my effigy in my yard, it's fine. I don't
I'm gonna play a recording of you with your eloquent defense of
When the kids
8
walk
hours
in-
of education
when the kids walk in on the
end of
20th
June.
day, it's gonna be on that flat screen down there.
I'll come greet them all on the 20th.
You guys wanna take a 5-minute recess?
We
Eat
have
some
a-
cookies, grab.
we still have a
grab
lot in
some
front
more.
of us?
We do have a lot in front of us.
do.
I have policies in front of us.
Yeah, I would say I'm fine, yes.
Let's take a 5-minute recess. It's 8 o'clock.
Better, audience can come back, you know?
Alright, we are back at 8.
Too early?
10. Hey, that was a nice 5-minute break. No, 10-minute break. Let's go into our policies, guys. We are looking at JICK, student safety and violence prevention. Second reading. We heard from guidance counselors tonight. Oh, sorry.
I put it on as you requested. I included a copy of the law for you and the investigation form that we've used since the statute was enacted. And you can see all the revisions dates of this policy are typically when legislation changes and there's updates to this. The School Boards Association puts out a revision, and the last one was 2014. If we go through this legislative session and there are any changes, they'll issue something else, usually in the spring or the fall. So it is up to date in terms of the statute, and you may wanna talk to Chris and Brian about the investigations and the forms and how they feel those are working, because they live with that document.
You guys wanna talk about it?
I just missed the beginning of that conversation.
So they wanna know, for the bullying policy, if you wanna speak about the documentation and the forms.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything lays out pretty quickly. Speaking to what Leila mentioned, I report when I go to a parent, so I call you. I tell you what's going on, tell you the investigation, and then I usually call back, either via email or I call back to tell them what the results were. In there's a line that says, I must also provide written notification of what the results were, and that's something I've slipped, but didn't even realize I wasn't doing it so properly. So obviously I'm gonna be doing that from the start now, but I guess it just seems another step that is not necessary, especially speaking. I guess it's more just for a paper trail, obviously. But besides that, I think what we have with the SAU is developed. It's a decent form. I mean, I would be hard pressed to kind of come up with anything better, to be honest with you. So it spells out everything I need to do on it. Gives the time amounts. I mean, I even think the time amount is crazy. I have, what is it?
Plenty of time.
It's 10 days report back, you know.
You always do it quicker than that.
I do it, I use
Absolutely.
I wrap everything up usually in 2 days unless there was that, you know, incident with Instagram where that takes a little bit more time and things of that nature. So in that case, it took 3 or 4 days, but that's the longest any event has ever taken on my behalf. So I don't have really any issues with that, the policy.
And you do Brian does a good job of documenting that, because there's a section of the form that asks about notification to parents, and I know that he always does that, and he always indicates on the form if he emailed to talk to them.
Yeah,
So I
that's for
think
time, everything's very documented except for that last piece that
if it's in
it
writing.
kind of just gets, after you're done with it, you kind
The
of like,
separate letter.
You're
it's a
talking
separate
about-
letter that needs to go home.
On the second to last page, there's the top paragraph number 4.
Are you on the form or the policy?
I'm on the policy, I'm sorry. That within 2 days of the completion, you'll notify the parents and send a letter is basically what you're saying was.
Yeah, it's number 11. Well, that's what, sorry, that's for the
That's
number
to
11 is
me.
for the superintendent, right, sorry.
So I guess one thing that I'm wondering, should we see, I don't wanna see the reports. I don't wanna see anything other than maybe just, you know, this quarter we had 5 incidences of bullying that we investigated and 3 of them we found to be bullying. Is that a,
I pulled that data for you,
oh,
as you asked me to. No, I just have to find it.
is that something that we need to include in policy if we wanna see it, or is that something we can just request?
No,
and-
you can just request it. The state stopped. I thought they were still collecting it, but they're not. But we have to keep them on file, so Kathy was able to just check go in and look. The most you've had in a whole year has been 5 or 6.
And that's actual cases of, or that is investigations of?
Both.
Well, any case that's reported is obviously investigated.
That's right.
And then sometimes it comes down to just harassment, it falls into a different
At some
category.
point, kids are being kids, and at some point, it's bullying, and at
Yes,
some point, it's
exactly.
something.
Right, yep.
So I had her go back 5 years. In 12-13, you had 3 incidents and they were all found bullying. 13-14, you had 6 and they were all founded. 14-15, there was none. 15-16, there was none. 16-17, there were 5 and they were all founded. And this year so far, you've had 5 and 3 have been founded.
Okay.
And that's not indicating the same, like some of these are the same kid. We didn't
No, I don't wanna know
disaggregate that, so it's total, but it may be that it was only 2 kids. It could be that it was only 1 kid. It could be 6 kids.
Right, I'm
I
just
didn't
more,
separate that out.
is it something where it's happening 100 times a year, or is it happening
No.
100 times a year?
No.
Bless you.
What about appeals that have come based on how we've approached it?
So you can't appeal the decision, so if they appeal it to me, all I do is verify that it was done and all the timelines were followed. But they can't appeal the results.
So when we hear complaints about not everything being called bullying, it's because it's been investigated thoroughly and it has not been found to be bullying.
And the distinction that we've tried to help parents understand is that just because it doesn't meet the definition of bullying or that doesn't fall under the statute, it doesn't mean that something didn't happen and there were consequences for that. And I think Leela mentioned it earlier about sometimes kids are just mean, sometimes they're just people say things you don't like. And after Brian goes through it, if it's like, well, yeah, that's what this was. It was a one-off, kids being kids. It may not be bullying, but it doesn't mean that he didn't deal with the situation and that there weren't consequences.
Now, so the number of investigations to bullying, regardless, that number, 5, 6, 7, 8, 3, whatever it is, seems lower than I would expect from the outside of a building with 530 kids in it.
Mm-hmm.
Are there times when stuff is brought to you that isn't forwarded as a bullying thing, but more of a discipline thing, where it doesn't get classified as a bullying or investigated as a bullying? And is there times when maybe some of those things should have been classified as a bullying investigation on the flip side?
I kind of go into it as all bullying. You start off the report, if you see the paperwork I have to use is a checklist of here's the situation and how's it presented to it. So I have to go through and it'll say, I don't know off the verbiage off my hand, but it gets to a point where it says like,
if yes, then,
continue, if no, stop
the
here.
investigation.
So if you get to that no, stop the investigation, does that report still get filed and included
Yes.
in those numbers?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we had 2 academic years where we did not have any incidences of that happen.
Right.
2
That,
years.
I guess that's what I'm having an issue kind of wrapping my head around, is it
And
just?
and when I started doing this, I think it was my second year, I called around to other schools, and I think 3 Rivers specifically, because most of these, I would say, are all middle school related. And he was, and I don't even know the size of Three Rivers is alone middle school is, 600 kids? 3 Rivers?
And 3 Rivers no less than that.
Less than that. So, at the time when I called around, they were the same, the numbers were very similar. So they were looking at 2 or 3 bullying investigations. So,
Actual, okay.
yeah,
So I guess what I'm trying to parse out is, you have a bullying investigation, I get that, you have 2 or 3 a year.
Yep.
How many things come before you that maybe could have been a case of bullying, but because it wasn't presented as something you're investigating for bullying, it's just a disciplinary thing?
I mean, it's just,
You know,
it's
you
your
know what I'm
take, it's
saying?
kind of like the take of the kid, like he can hit me in the hall, bump into me and say, he's been bullying me, or it's because their lockers are next to
Right,
each other.
but-
So it's how you have to kind of, that's where being an adult comes into play.
Right,
And you have
but
to say, have you actually thought about it this way? And then the kid's like, well, yeah, I guess I do slam his locker every time, different things come up. So that's the discretion of being an adult compared to a 12-year-old boy, So, or then you have instances of, like, with technology. You know, we had one year where the kids were text messaging each other and it just kind of got out of control real quick, you know, bashing each other, but then they're friends. So is it really, you know, and they're claiming it's bullying, but you're not bullying each other. You're two friends that got heated into an argument and then, you know, and yeah.
Right. And I think, Zach, maybe what you're looking for here is because the numbers seem low, that those instances don't necessarily mean 2 kids. They can't disclose how many kids it means, but one bullying instance could deal with a number of kids.
Okay, fair enough,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Mhm.
So,
That's true.
all right, so you
And-
feel
and,
that,
and the law, like, I mean, the one thing when that presenter was here, he came from Vermont, so, and he was helped make the Vermont law, which I found, New Hampshire's law includes a single incident where.
Significant incident,
And, I mean, that's very hard to justify, you know, if I'm on the bus and someone curses me out, can that be a signal, you know, incident? But New Hampshire, Vermont, where there is worded differently, and it actually makes a lot more sense.
Allows you to compound incidents.
Yeah, it allows you to have that a little bit of more, like, you're
Looking for the pattern.
looking for the pattern, exactly. They're
Yeah,
wording,
that is has been difficult because who decides what a significant issue is?
Yeah.
You know, it's very gray and you're constantly trying to decide what is middle school behavior versus is a kid being bullied. I think the important thing is reporting it, investigating it, and then consequences for the kids, whether it's a bullying incident or not.
and I mean, it kind of says that, you know, defined as a single significant incident or a pattern of incidents.
right, and that's,
So
yeah.
it gives you that leeway here.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but in the Vermont is a little bit just
Different language.
different language, and it just fits more of what, as an investigator in this like, you know, doing this for 5 years now, it fits that mold of what you're really looking for.
Is
So,
that something you would want to see included in our policy?
You can't.
you can't, because
By
it's
the
New
law.
Hampshire.
law.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So unless you have powers to change the whole law, I mean.
You could submit a bill next year.
Yeah, Mr. Daly, I think Chris may have had a.
So, I just wanted to say that, like, when it comes to trying to figure out, is it just a kid being mean, is it a single significant event? Like, I talked to Brian, I wanna make, like, my final project for my class is gonna be doing a thing on bullying, and, like, I'm gonna rely on his judgment. It's great. So, when it comes to parsing out, like, I get your concern, he's really good at it and super thoughtful about it. That's absolutely true. I have full confidence.
So the other big thing is obviously is just if we have our policies, and this applies to all of the policies, is that we follow the policies. If it sets timelines, we
Right,
just,
yeah,
we gotta,
so-
you know, because that's the stuff you get hung on down the road.
Right.
So here's a couple of things that I would think would be a bit of a gray area. I think most people think of bullying as between students, one student versus a group, another individual or a group. But in the definition, the last two are that gray area, creates a hostile educational environment or substantially disrupts the orderly operation of the school. And when, especially that last one, are we looking at the order, you know, obviously somebody pulling a fire alarm or something like that, you know, falls under that definition, but what about students that are disruptive in class, you know, consistently, how are we?
That's Brian's job to determine. I mean, that's what,
Yeah,
that's his job.
Yeah.
So,
So, but that would still go under that same form, right? You would still investigate that.
Yeah, I wouldn't use that form for an instant, like,
But-
if I have a kid being disruptive in the class, that's a totally different, that's my
I guess that's what I
write-up.
was trying to get at before, is it all starting on one initial form?
No, I mean,
No.
Brian's dealing with
This
events all day long.
That's
Yeah.
why I'm
And
looking at
he-
like the sheer
We
number.
have our own form that we use here,
Okay.
that I designed based off my time in Somersworth. We had one here that
You were
was not,
sentenced in Somersworth?
was that,
You
yeah.
were sentenced in Somersworth?
So the teachers use that as a reporting tool to me and fill out that.
That's just an action form.
Yes,
basically.
exactly, yep,
That
and then I
says
go off that,
your frequent flyer form or whatever it is.
right, yep. And it's gotten to the point where we've just reduced that because for the most part, the kids who are getting in trouble are the same kids all the time. So it's, yeah, and so for them to fill out the form is, I'm in contact with the parents and I have the numbers almost memorized. So, you know, it's just kind of like the way it is.
Okay. So any action on JICK? Are we pretty comfortable?
I'm okay with it.
I am, I just wanna make sure we're following our policy. I think it's good for it to come up every once in a while, just to make sure we can.
Alright, so we can take it off the agenda for next time?
We'll reaffirm it, or just.
We don't need to, it's already approved, so.
Okay.
Alright,
KF, I think.
facilities, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
We wanted this for a reason.
Yes, and I actually spoke with the athletic administrator this evening, and talked about our concerns around the scheduling of things at the same time as
Dances and
dances and such. And she was absolutely amenable to whatever changes we wanted to make, and said she would only ask that we give as much possible notice if something needs to get canceled. So.
Yeah,
So-
and really, you know, the biggest time of year that affects it is in basketball season.
Right.
So.
So I mean, section I gives the athletic director that ability.
Right.
For all school and non-school athletic activities. So is it just adding?
Maybe that can be overridden at any point by the administration.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's kind of a given anyway, you guys can do that, but I don't know, we put that language in there just to codify it,
Yeah,
is that the right word? I don't know. Codify.
I just,
So, you wanna change I to the athletic director will coordinate the schedule and use of the gym for all school and non-school athletic activities. The schedule can be overridden by the administration at any point for the safety of the students.
love it.
Or just say with the approval of the administration?
Or you could do-
Although,
No, they don't have to approve it. It's, at the end of the day, it's the administration's building, so they have the final say.
She said that again, the schedule could be
overridden
overridden at any time.
point by the administration for the safety of the students.
It's not even a safety thing, it's just.
We don't want like discretion around
No basketball tonight.
I'm canceling Christmas.
So that's a motion.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor of JK as amended? Or KF, excuse me, KF as amended?
Aye.
Alright, that clears that up.
Okay.
So we don't need that anymore. I don't have an agenda in front of me, so I'm gonna.
Number 7 is informational items.
Infrastructure grants.
And that's the one that I shared with you. We received finalized approval in the amount of $26,542.
Is that enough to cover the entire cost?
No, we
That's
have to,
80%.
we have to match 20%.
I think it's 6682 or so.
Are we pulling that out of this year or next year?
Can
we already
take
made
Have
that
to-
motion
To do it this year, didn't we?
Okay, up to 12,000, yeah, I have to talk to Amber to see exactly how that works with the grant stuff.
So is that,
So 80%, it's gonna be like $6 grand. $6 grand.
Yeah, and unless we take it out of an existing line, it's gonna cut into that 67.
can
so.
we pull that from the building repair and improvement fund?
That's what I was thinking.
We have money there.
You're not really repairing. Does it say
It's an
improvement
improvement.
too?
It's an
It
upgrade.
is an
It says
improvement.
improvement and,
I thought we changed the
Repair.
name to repair, we took the improvement
I thought it
away.
was facilities repair and improvement.
I think the trustee stood up at the deliberative session,
He did make a recommendation.
or maybe I'm thinking of the
to-
town deliberative
I think you're thinking
session.
of the
No, we did it downstairs in the CAF, and he did make recommendations to change the.
Because Mike doesn't,
No,
Chris does
no,
everything himself.
They changed
Yeah.
the name to
That's a
the
line that I
same,
believe
to
that
the
is.
same fund, otherwise we would have had to create a fund. The way it was
think it was-
written, there was a non-existent
We
fund.
got,
I think it wasn't removing the improvement and making it strictly a
No, actually,
a
we were
repair
changing
fund?
the warrant articles.
We changed it to match what existed in the language.
we have, I think there's
In the
a
existing
good amount of money in
trusts.
there, but we can look again.
could we come back to you at the next meeting and see if we've identified a place to take it?
Yes.
I was trying to find the actual warrants just to see what they were.
All right. Anything else on the infrastructure grant? Any other informational items? Anybody?
Yeah, there is, I briefly mentioned it as part of the CRB, but the CRB, I believe, is gonna maybe, I don't think there's a planned forum this spring with parents, and so they were hoping to maybe find a night this spring to work on the work study habits idea. Getting some input from parents before they craft this thing and then present it to us in August to be rolled out in September.
I think we should also come back around to the facilities improvement CIP chapter plan sooner than later, as the funds that we have in balance for
Just walking away.
yeah, they're leaving.
I had that conversation with the chairman as well.
So why don't we put it on the next agenda if we address it? I'm not sure we will get to it, but I don't want it to fade away. I don't like
Impact fees?
impact fees. And our continuing facilities improvement plan / chapter of the CIP that the town is not moving on right now. I think they're thinking about it.
If you have to dig up that hill, that would be a really good time to put that classroom in, just saying.
Oh, I know. I think the entire building repair fund might dig up that hill.
I have an item too.
Scared of the concept of what that might be.
Yeah, you don't wanna think about it, but we're gonna have to at some point.
I have informational too.
Sure, go ahead.
We put the audit report in Sakai for you, and I think it's on the website too. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. Do you want the auditor to come and walk through it, or Amber to come and walk through it, or was it self-explanatory?
It was reasonably explanatory, and then we also had Amber present to the SAU. Does anybody feel that Amber should come and talk to us about our specific challenges?
I just wanted to, I guess I'm concerned that the public is aware of it, and so if it's on our website, I think that's probably fine.
Okay.
Is the SAU board meeting, was that video? Have we
Not
posted
video.
that?
The dinner?
The dinner, I wonder what, I mean, we didn't video that though.
We didn't video
No.
that.
There are just concerns of the community about, audits and finances, and so.
We posted them on the website though, so.
Okay, maybe that's not.
If you wanna, if the warrant article is facilities repair and improvement. Is,
The final version of it,
right,
and improvement, okay.
and improvement, expendable trust. So, not to backtrack, but in an effort to accomplish something, I would wanna, I think, go into that and take whatever we need for the balance of the cameras.
Okay. But we will hear next month about
Do we have to spend, is there a sunset on, like, do we need to spend that money?
the grant.
The grant, or do we have?
Oh, yeah, there is, but we have time. I think it can go into next year, can't it? Do you remember?
I don't.
I think it has to be expended.
We need to have a public hearing if we're going to take that money out of a trust fund.
Yeah.
And if there's a timeline, we just wanna make sure we fall inside of it.
It might be on the application, it's not on the approval letter.
You guys can.
Regarding the audit, is Amber coming anyway to talk about the default budget or no?
Not unless you need her to, but she's happy to do that if you'd like her to.
I think at maybe the end of maybe our July meeting, when we have more of a sense, well, or I don't know if maybe June would be more effective, because then we would have a better sense of what our surplus is going to be, and some thought into where we want to allocate funds off of the default budget.
June, you would definitely not have enough information, I don't think.
Okay.
we wait, there's so many invoices that we're constantly chasing,
They come in at the end.
yeah. Unfortunately.
So I don't need to have her come in, but you guys wanna? No, okay. All right, any other informational items?
No.
Public comments?
I'm living in Deerfield right now.
Seeing none. We'll go into non-public for NHRSA 91-A:32C
And B, please?
and B.
Yes.
Moved.
That's us out too.
Nate?
You can stay
Yes.
if you want.
Zach? Yes. Ken?
Yes.
For the
Jim?
hire.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And we
I
are
didn't
going
know
into
which-
non-public.
that's-
Were you part of that
35.
committee, or was Brian?
Right? Yeah, no.
We are out of non-public at 9:23.
Move to seal the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I would entertain a motion to accept the nomination of
Tech
new
coordinator?
Tech coordinator, what's her name?
Brooke
Brooke.
Petroselli, if I say it correctly.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And then we needed a motion in regards to.
To accept my recommendation for a student reassignment.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
Was that Nate and Ken?
Zach and Ken. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Move to adjourn.
Second?
Is there a third thing? No.
I think that's it.
Think we're good?
Go
Oh,
ahead.
did we seal the minutes?
Yep,
Yep.
exactly.
My specialty.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Hit the button.